We already know that Christians don't give a toss. They don't give a flying fuck, really, about whether the Trinity is idolatry or not. They just don't care. You can explain it till you're blue in the face, but really what they worship is their hatred of Jews and Muslims. And because they are really atheists at heart, they can come up with ever more creative explanations about why the Trinity ain't idolatry, but their explanations are basically incoherent, absurd, and transparently creative, and based on nothing that is truthful or logical or moral. What they mostly, overwhelmingly, or even absolutely care about is that they shall not be found out to have been believing in an absurdity and killing each other over an absurdity for centuries and generations. This is what is more precious to them than anything. Forget Jesus or their um, their immortal soul or the afterlife. They frankly don't believe, but they have to come up with increasingly convoluted lies to explain the Trinity. It's not hard to explain the Trinity. I have tried. I have tried quite a few times, and it's really very simple. Athanasius anticipated how Jews would argue with Christians. They would say that the God of Israel is more powerful than the crucified Christ, and therefore they win the theological debate. And that is why the Roman Empire needed such draconian and totalitarian rules that basically forbid Jews from learning their own language, from reciting the Shema, from being in Rome, because they really needed to kick out the Jews to allow the absurdity of the Trinity to become the prevailing religion of Rome. And that has its origins in prosecuting those who deny the Trinity. Of course, in those times, there was no idea of freedom of expression or freedom of belief, and this idea trickled down to European kingdoms after the Roman Empire fell. So instead of thinking that the Trinity is in any way mysterious, think of it as Athanasius basically saying, we don't want the Jews to claim that their God is more powerful than our crucified Christ. Therefore, we have to make Jesus co-equal, co-eternal, and co-substantial with God. And that is really the simple solution to the mystery of the Trinity. Why is this important to Jews and Muslims? Well, they need to make the point that Christianity is idolatry to make these Christians give up their false and absurd beliefs in order to more quickly adopt a more sensible, moral, and legal political system that would give them accountable government. I see that MK has popped up to ask me if I'm Muslim. The answer is no, I'm not. I have taken an interest in theology, and I should be credited with being the person who solved the mystery of the Trinity and has made it simple for Muslims and Jews to understand and repeat to Christians. So remember, please, why Christians have to worship the Trinity. It is because they cannot have Jews saying that their God of Israel is more powerful than their crucified Christ. MK asks if I am atheist. No, I'm agnostic. MK sounds like a Muslim. But that's really all I wanted to say. I wanted to keep it short and sweet, under 10 minutes. It is important for Jews and Muslims to care about Christian idolatry because it affects them. We already know that Christians have acquired 3 global empires, and obviously their corruption affects our global village, and their corruption and policies of Sodom and Gomorrah needs to be pushed back for their good as well as our own. So when Jews and Muslims discuss religion with Christians, they must in no uncertain terms denounce the idolatry of Christianity and explain its origins in the way that I have suggested. MK asks, why would I call my channel Secular Quranism if I'm atheist? Well, Secular Quranism is, well, secular, isn't it? I am, since you're so interested, I am a political thinker, a political philosopher, a moral philosopher, very keen on solving the political, social, and economic problems of the West. I believe that because the Quran is the best available guide to humanity, we should all use it, but obviously use it in a way that is in harmony with reason and morality and on what is obviously true. It is true that it would be logical to use a Quran if it is true that it is the best available guide to humanity. And that is my foundational belief. MKR says, it looks like you're speaking on behalf of a religion while you're not a believer of it. Well, I would point out to you that even atheists often say there ought to be a law against this, there ought to be a law against that. So even atheists see the point of the law. Now, the law needs to come from a moral system, and by that I mean either religion or a secular political ideology. We have noticed that religion lasts significantly longer than secular political ideologies, and this explains the longevity of the 5 world religions that you may have heard of, the 3 Abrahamic religions, as well as Hinduism and Buddhism. So if we don't want to be constantly changing our religion, we should just choose the best one available and adopt it with all our strength and all our powers of belief and stick with it, so that when it finally produces results, we will be pleased that we chose it. So I am proposing that people choose the religion with the most powerful God and the most and the best book of rules, really. MK asks, do you believe in the state implementing the death penalty? Well, of course. If you believe in the death penalty, who else is going to implement it but the government? So are you going to state your religion, MK? I have spoken for more than 10 minutes, and I wanted to keep this short and sweet. If you have any further questions, MK, please ask your next question, or I will close the stream. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I will just finish by saying idolatry is the key subject to determine the righteousness or otherwise of the Jew or Gentile. If they don't take it seriously, they obviously don't believe in God, and then you can dismiss their opinions. Yes, I see MK, the Muslim, is saying, is reminding me that the Quran is not taken in a vacuum. I never claimed it was. God directs. Yes, obviously, when the Prophet was around, the Muslims had to obey the Prophet, but now that the Prophet is deceased, we will just have to rely on our judiciary to interpret the Quran in a way that is in harmony with wisdom, with justice, and with reason. I know you'll be saying that I have to follow the Hadith. I do not reject all the Hadith, only the ones that clearly contradict the Quran. So don't worry about my Hadith rejection. I Some of it is very useful. In fact, I do use some of the hadith. I just refuse to go with the hadith that recommend that prescribe the execution of adulterers and apostates. So I've just told you which hadith I object to, the ones that prescribe the death penalty for those who are considered apostates and adulterers, because it's not even mentioned in the Quran. So anything in the Hadith that clearly contradicts the Quran will be rejected. It ought to be rejected. And Muslims certainly do not have the monopoly on correct interpretation, because if they were correctly interpreting their Quran, the Ottoman Empire would not have collapsed. Any further questions? All right. Thank you, MK, for coming and posting your questions. I hope I have answered them adequately. Yes, I know you're going to be going on about your hadith. I'm not the only one who has a problem with the hadith clearly contradicting the Quran. And I also know that a lot of Muslims are more attached to their hadith than to their Quran. But logically, the Quran is the primary source of the word of God, and the hadith is only a secondary source. chapter 24, verse 2 talks about um, illicit intercourse. I think that's how it's translated, as it basically means men committing lewd acts with men, women committing lewd acts with women, women and men committing lewd acts with each other, while not being married to each other. So it's actually quite straightforward in my view. I wish to make things simple rather than complicated, but I know there are people who like making trouble, like making easy things difficult so they can stick their oar in to cause trouble. Well, if you're saying that these Muslims whose caliphate have crashed and burnt, who are currently without an official religious leader, know better than me. I'm not saying that I automatically know better than they do, but I'm saying there's nothing they can do if Western governments decide to adopt the Quran without taking all the advice of these Muslims whose caliphates have crashed and burnt because they clearly distorted the meaning of the Quran for their own reasons of political expediency. Right, well, thank you for coming. I won't take this stream beyond 20 minutes. Islam was created by the church. This is getting silly now, isn't it? All right, I'm off if you're going to be silly and talking about Islam being created by the church without further explanation. Thank you and goodbye.